Can we go to Q&A now? Anybody got a question about improvisation? Right there.
How do you improvise a fugue, and what's the largest number of voices you can improvise in?
Okay. I have a book on this subject called Improvising Fugue. And it explains that. The hardest part of fugue is actually just the exposition. And the reason for that is it's the strict part. After that, you have presentations where the subject should appear in one or more voices. And then you have these episodes where you don't really have to present it at all. So that's just normal music, right? Like a lot of the fugue is just regular music. And it's not actually that strict. So the hard part is the exposition. Without going into all the technical stuff, I spent an entire summer improvising fugue expositions for 2 hours every day. Because I know how they work. I know what tonal and real answers are. I've played the well-tempered clavier. I know all the theory. But what I found was I couldn't do this stuff in real time. I kept going, and wanting to write things on paper and memorize them. And so it almost felt, this is honestly what it felt like. It felt like there were neuron connections in my brain that were not complete. And I felt like every day I was just like, trying to get these two neurons, come on! And it was hard. Like I spent a lot of time doing it until I could just get better and better at handling it in real time. I usually start people with fairly simple subjects like, what's that one by Handel? Or there's one by Eberlin. Let's see. Something like that. One, it's stepwise, and it stays within the first 5 or 6 scale degrees, so you avoid the problems of 7 that you have in minor. It starts on 1, so it's easy to find. If you know what key you're in, it's pretty easy to find. And then I would just start. I'd be like, okay, I'll put in the soprano. That's the end. Well, now I have to bring it in on 5, right? And it's mildly problematic because it's a 6th, which is a little weak sounding. It happens historically, like it's legit. You can do this. But it just sounds a little dumb, I think, sometimes. I don't know, I'm self-conscious about it. So the freedom of fugue is I can tack on a measure or half a measure to the subject of just whatever, of garbage. It's called a codetta to be respectable. Okay? So just playing around like that. So that was soprano, alto, and on down. Now I turn around and go, okay, bass first. And you end up with different problems when you go the other way. Okay? Everything that was a 5th is now a 4th. And this is the big problem in imitated counterpoint. Invertibility is that 3rds invert to 6th, cool. 2nds invert to 7ths, cool. Octaves, unisons, cool. 5ths are consonant and 4ths are dissonant. So that's the one that explodes in your face when you invert it. Okay? And that's the whole reason there's a thing called a tonal answer, is to avoid it blowing up. So again, a lot of it is just being at the keyboard and developing a sense of how it works. It's kind of like thinking with your fingers a lot. Taking stuff you already know from class, you got an A in it, but learning how to do it physically while the metronome's ticking. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. Okay, very, very hands-on roll-up sleeves. Great question. Okay, it took me a long time because I'm a slow learner. Okay, I'm not like you guys. I'm not one of these CIM geniuses. I'm just like an idiot from a cornfield. So it takes me a long time. Okay, great. Next question. Yes?
Do you get instances where your brain is faster than your hand and then you have to stop?
My brain is faster than my hands?
Yeah.
Yeah. Although usually it's the opposite problem. You can have both problems. Because why should your brain and hands just automatically move at the same speed? They'll get ahead of each other. In music, you can always waste time. Always. You can always just make the dominant longer, okay? Or the fermata is longer. Or, like Vivaldi, do the circle of fifths twice. Just go up an octave. And so part of the discipline of practice is learning to manage time and not admit fault. Like it says on your car insurance card, do not admit fault. When you get in a wreck, you're not supposed to say you were wrong. You're supposed to be like, well, I don't know what happened. And nobody comes to a concert because they want the performer to admit fault. Or make a face, or like, oh, I'm so terrible. If there's some quick way of just covering it up, that's more musically satisfying. So part of the practice discipline is wasting time, drawing out a cadence, for example, if I don't know what I'm going to do next. I can just go, but I can also... And if I do my facial expressions right, it will seem as profound as Beethoven. It'll sound like the Emperor Concerto. And what I'm actually doing is like, oh crap, I do not. What was that theme? I had another theme. Okay, but I don't want you to know that, and so I'm going to fake it. Okay, so yeah, that's what you have to do. It's a big part of the skill. What great questions! You guys are awesome. Okay, let's keep going. Who's next? In the very back, please.
For a beginner,
Yes.
how long and what would you do to a schema before moving on to the next?
Yes. When I teach, there are many ways to approach this, but when I take a student, I always say, before we meet, go learn rule of the octave in every key, in every position, with a metronome, no mistakes. Okay? Because again, rule of the octave is the polite tourist language of music. It's the hello, where is the bus, how much is a ticket, excuse me, thank you, I would like to order the sandwich. It's that kind of language. It's not sophisticated, but it'll get you around town. Okay? And by the way, sometimes I do this just goofing around. I think I did this at Rice University a couple weeks ago. I made up an aria about being a music major at Rice, like a recitative. And I just did it all with rule of the octave. Okay? And the funny thing is it sounds so real. Okay? So somebody pick a key for me. Any tonality. E flat major. Okay, so. And Professor Shapiro went forth unto his studio, and lo, there waited for him a student who was sore afraid. You see how real it sounds. That's just an exercise for 10-year-old kids in the Parlamento tradition, going up the scale in rule of the octave. So the first thing I teach them is this, and from that they learn what it feels like to have an available vocabulary and not to panic. And then we start improvising pieces in rule of the octave. And by the way, rule of the octave can sound really amazing. All you need is a couple neighbor tones. You can be super expressive, like... that's all just rule of the octave. I bet you anything, I could come into one of, no, probably not. You guys are too smart. At some lesser school, I could come in to one of your juries and just say, this is a keyboard aria from some suite you guys never heard of. It's by Arcangelo Spumoni. It's a manuscript I found. I found this manuscript. And it's from 1792, and I'm going to play it. And I could just do this, and I would fake out every faculty member. And they'd be like, yeah, it sounds real to us. Just keep your pedaling nice and clean. And rethink your articulation. 2-note phrases. They'd find something to pick on. But it sounds real because it is real. Because this is the language they're using. This is the same set of ingredients. So I always start with rule of the octave, and then from there we build out into other bass motions. So that's the answer to your question. We had another one back up there?
Yes, I had a question about the structure of your improvisation, because I imagine when you walk on stage, you have some sort of the idea of what the structure would be. So how does that work? Do you really have that?
Depends on the piece. Sometimes, like when I do sonatas, and I've been experimenting with sonata improvisation, obviously sonatas are all about structure, right? You have to, that's the main thing you want from a sonata is give us the feeling of and so what happens with sonata improvisation, first of all, if you start with 2 themes that are established, now the exposition is almost a done deal, right? Play the first thing. You might make up a little transitional stuff, play the second theme, and maybe you can invent a closing theme, but mostly it's already prepackaged. Then in the development, you can have all kinds of fun, because you can do anything. You can ignore the first theme and do the development on the second theme. You can make the 2 themes fight it out, like chickens or something. You can do whatever you want. And then the recapitulation is largely predestined again. So in that case, it's like a Mad Lib where only about half the words you're filling in. It's still pretty fun, and it has a lot of its own challenges. However, in something like this Pachelbel toccata, it truly doesn't matter, okay? It is truly stream of consciousness. So I deliberately don't think too much. I like to surprise myself. I just have, if you guys want to look at my notes afterwards, this is all I have. And I know I'm not going to start with a fugue because that'd be stupid, right? You got to do something else first. So I know that'll be in the middle. I forgot to do this one thing. But that's okay. I don't care. And I did sort of want a feeling of recapitulation where I came back to, I really love that theme. And I thought that would be cool. But it was not all that deliberate. So depending on the type of piece, you either have to follow a very careful structure, or you can make a game out of not having a structure and see what comes out of it. Like, Calvin and Hobbes, they play this game Calvin Ball, where every turn you change the rules. It's sort of like Calvin Ball. Okay? All right. How are we doing here for time? We can still got a little time. Next question. Right there, please.
As the HPP world is growing, I was wondering if you had any recent concert or audience experience where you saw this done really effectively in performance context, like improvised classical era cadenzas or anything
Sure.
like that. That's really been
It's growing a lot. It's still in little pockets, but we've all kind of met each other now. We all kind of know each other. And the events are starting to happen. There's a major Parlamento conference in Vienna in November. I'll be playing there and doing keynote and stuff. There's a workshop in Rome in October on 19th century Romantic keyboard improvisation. We did one last year in April in Perugia. So, there are even some official events that are starting to take place. I've got, a lot of my organist friends do this every day. What's really new, though, is the melody instrument players, the string players, and so on, starting to figure out what they can do with Parlamento. And they're really going for it. There's some leaders out there who are really showing the way, and I think there's going to be a kind of a different form of musicianship for strings and melody instruments in the next 10 years. So I think it's exciting. There is a conference we did in 2022 online You can get to it if you just go to my website and then go to Improv Planet. You have to register for it as though it's a class, but it doesn't cost anything. And it's got all these presentations and performances from people all over the world. There's a 14-year-old kid who does 4 preludes and fugues. This kid, yeah, he's crazy. But string players and wind players, and musicologists and so on. So yes, it's really starting to grow. The challenge, and I discussed this with my colleague, Professor Bennett, the challenge is large groups of disparate instruments. Because you have to have some governing principle of what everybody's going to play, right? You can't read each other's minds. So on the next downbeat, if you think we're going here and I think we're going there, it's a train wreck. So what tends to happen in groups is we tend to play on ground basis so that we have some kind of set of chord changes like a jazz band. So last, whenever it was, I did a residency at McGill, and we had a large class of early music people. And so we would use the Goldberg. The first 8 bars of the Goldberg variations as a loop. And that way everybody knew what was going to happen every 3 beats. And within that, the music actually ends up sounding pretty good. Or Passacaglia, which is just... Or Lamento. All of those standard progressions that we know, passa mezzo, etc., etc. So yes, I think we'll see a lot more in the next few years because there's a generation of young people who are coming and they are going to eat my lunch. They're smart and they started way earlier in life than I did, so I'm very excited to see what they do. Okay, we got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. In the back there. Not at all. Not at all. Many of the people, well, I shouldn't say that. I should say a few people I've talked to who are improvisers say perfect pitch is in the way as much as it is helpful. Okay? I do not have perfect pitch. All 3 of my children do, which is infuriating. Really annoying. But I find that that's not what I go to for, that's not my compass, okay? And learning the bass motions has helped my audiation tremendously. Like if I'm just trucking along in some key and I'm like, I want to go to the Neapolitan 6th, and I'm going to suspend it. Having done it and thought through it so many times, I already know what it's going to sound like. I can hear it. So my audiation has really improved because I've tried going everywhere you can go harmonically, and I know what it sounds like. So that's kind of what I use as a guiding thing. We're done at 1:30, right, Professor? Okay, I don't have time to play another piece, so maybe if we have just 1 or 2 more questions, we can just finish with that. Professor?
First, 2 questions.
Yeah.
One very quick. Beethoven, Opus 109 and Opus 79, same progression, descending. Is that one of the one of the standard?
Yeah, that's known as a Romanesca. And it's a way of harmonizing a descending scale. And what happens with a lot of these motions is that there's the basic way of doing it, which is rule of the octave, and then there's all these amazing variants. And 109, etc., is Romanesca, which is chord of the 5th, chord of the 6th, chord of the 5th, chord of the 6th, all the way down. Yerdigan showed that it's like statistically the most prevalent opener in certain bodies of repertoire, like, Baroque Italian violin repertoire. It's what they always do. It's like the hello of their. The other one, I call this page 1 because it's start there, and you keep the bass, and you go to a 4/2, and then 6/5. So if you go to Beethoven, Christ on the Mount of Olives. Zadok the priest. They're all identical. So statistically, you know, in certain bodies of literature, that one would be absolutely everywhere. Okay? So, it's kind of a long story how Beethoven would also know this stuff, and the Germans also knew this stuff. We can't go into that, but yeah, he's still thinking bass motions in his era, for sure. Okay, I'll hang around here for a minute if you have questions, but I know you got to keep a schedule. Folks, this is really fun to meet you and visit with you for a little while. Thank you so much. Thank you.